Welcome to the Red Dice Diaries with John and Hannah. We're going to be cracking open the post bag and answering some of your voicemails. And our first voicemail is from that cheeky chappy Goblin's Henchman. Take it away.
Hi Hannah, hi John, Goblin's Henchman here. I thought I'd just leave a message about the most recent voice message episode. Interesting messages there. Two things occurred to me. One was that I think, for example, Spencer talked about too much character background. I sometimes think too much character backgrounds is a bit like player railroading, because their background, especially a lengthy one, is trying to impose a dialogue on where the adventure is going, and if you ignore it, then you're sort of not doing service to that person's background. But obviously, if they do too much, then they're sort of taking it too far away. And then the other thing is, I think Hannah talked about generating like a session zero where you all generate something together. One of the things I've made, sorry, I feel like I plug my stuff too much, but I like to share my ideas. What can I say? You remember the game Consequences? You probably played as a kid, where you all fold a bit of paper and you write a line and pass it around, and then you read the amusing story at the end. Well, I had an idea of, it's on my drive-through page, about doing that, but for session zero backgrounds. So everyone kind of takes a turn writing a sort of appropriately sort of crafted sentence, and at the end you find out what your character background is, and hopefully there's a secret that you can keep to yourself just to reveal later in play. Anyway, just an idea. Thanks for the show. Cheerio.
Hey Goblin's Henchman, thank you very much for leaving us a voicemail. And yeah, I've got to say, I do agree to a certain extent. I can see how GMs could feel under pressure if they're given a lot of big backgrounds to actually include all of that stuff in the game. But obviously you're not under any onus to actually do so. If I get big backgrounds on people, I always at least try and sort of skim through them, but make it clear, I'm probably not going to get around to including all of this. So I think if the players are fine with that, it's not such a big deal, to be honest. Like I say, I'm not the world's biggest fan of massive backgrounds, but it doesn't do any harm at the end of the day, as long as I'm not expected to memorise it and include it all in the game, because that's just not going to happen.
The idea of doing a group background gen with the Consequences game, I quite like that idea. I'm not sure if you intended it to be everybody gets a piece of paper and it gets passed around the room, but I really like that idea for a sort of politicking type game, because way everybody knows one secret about each of the other players that you're politicking, because they came up with it for you. But part of the game would be finding out the other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm proper nicking that. Cheers.
So thank you very much for that. And it looks like Goblin's Henchman has got some more to say, this time on the subject of barroom hex flowers.
Hi John, hi Hannah, it's Goblin's Henchman here. So I really enjoyed listening to your episode about the bar brawl using hex flowers. I mean, that's probably no surprise that I enjoyed it. But I think what you demonstrated brilliantly, first of all, I thought you explained it very well, actually. I struggle to explain it sometimes because probably it's a bit too much in my sort of... I'm too close to it. But I thought what you demonstrated brilliantly was that how with a concept in mind and a few ideas, how easy it is to potentially put together a very serviceable little mini game like that. Brilliant, good stuff. The only thing I noticed on your website I would be tempted to just tweak is that I don't think you added about the edge rules. What happens if you go off the hex? I mean, it's not a deal breaker. I mean, I understood it implicitly, and I'm sure people who are familiar with hex flowers would understand that too. But maybe someone new to it wouldn't realise that if you go off the edge of the hex, you rejoin on the opposite edge, the opposite column or the opposite row, as it were.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Goblin's Henchman. That was a bit of an omission as we were sort of trying to get that post out. I have since gone back and amended the post on our blog where it's got the sort of printout and the slightly neatened up version of the hex flower to specifically show what happens if you go off the edge of the hex flower. and to provide a clear example for that. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention.
Cheers.
I certainly don't think the hex flower needs any tweaking, really, actually, but because I have a complicated brain and kind of immersed in these things a little bit too deeply, the only thing I thought would be maybe neat is, for example, when the person gets the adventuring team gets thrown out the window or door, whatever. Maybe you can do a random roll and determine who was thrown out, and then offer that PC the choice to abandon their friends. Might add an interesting dynamic. If they're getting whooped, you might think maybe the magic user legs it, hoping to help his friends later. The only other thing is, quite often when I do these hex flowers, I don't return to the central hex unless you roll it. And sometimes in that central hex, I put in a wildcard element. So if you get back to the central hex, then you roll, say, for example, a d6 and pick off a new table of random events. So I'm not sure what I'd do in a barb roll. So maybe someone knocks over a lantern, starts a fire, I don't know, fall through the floorboards. I think the City Watch, where it is a really good finish. But, you can imagine, maybe some wild magic goes off somehow, I don't know. But as I said, I think actually the way you've done it is great, because it's, as you say, completely agnostic. So if you put in magic user, spells go off, then you're already poking into a niche. And again, something that might be a bit niche is, I was thinking, yes, 1 point per character is a really, really good idea, because then, it limits it quite, in a significant, in a simple and significant way. The only thing you could do, and again, this is possibly steering it away from an agnostic system, is characters with high constitution, like that barbarian with 18 constitution. In AD&D, you would have +3 con bonus. Whether or not those +3s go into the mix. You can imagine that maybe that barbarian just goes and goes and goes because he's so tough. It's not hit points, it's just raw toughness. But again, this is just me applying my overly complicated brain to things, because I think what's really great about what you demonstrated is how you can generate a very good and entertaining hex flower quickly and making it serviceable. But yes, the playtesting was definitely really interesting, and that's, from my point of view, was the bit that I obviously fascinated by, because as a person who writes and sort of, if you like, designs these things, I'm interested in how people do it or would do it. So having a little look at how you did that was, most interesting, and also from my point of view entertaining. So bravo, and hopefully people out there will get some use out of it. And if anyone, I'll be listening to a follow-up episode if people have comments. Okay, cheers, and thanks for considering using it, because I think it's a great little way of generating these little mini games. So I'm pleased that you thought of trying it, because I have to say, I'm not sure I'd ever thought of a bar crawl using Hexflower. So I was really, really pleased to see how you did that. Anyway, I'm going long here, so cheers, bye.
Thanks, Goblin's Henchman. We've really enjoyed doing the bar brawl hex flower thing, and I think it might be something to play with again at another point. I'd certainly like to.
Oh yeah, it was very entertaining today.
Just to acknowledge why we had the very, very simplified rules, the theory was that your magic users wouldn't be capable of using their magic, and your superior fighters wouldn't be all that superior because everyone's smashed. It's a bar brawl, and thus everybody's reduced to the lowest common denominator. Yeah,
there was also the fact that the barroom brawl is a more chaotic and enclosed and sort of scrappy environment than your traditional combat. Now, obviously, we know that despite the fact it's represented by static tokens and whatever, we know that a combat represents people moving around, but you're not in a cave with some goblins or whatever. It's a room heaving with people, furniture in the way, obstructions, stuff like that, improvised weaponry. So the way me and Hannah were thinking about it is neither the spellcasters nor any other classes would really be at their optimal performance in a barroom situation. That's one of the reasons we wanted to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we really did enjoy doing it, and I'm sort of hoping John will maybe do some more with me at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure we will get round to doing some further hex flowers in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Right, let's see who we've got next out of the old post bag.
Hey, Hannah and John, this is Jason. Just want to say I enjoyed your latest listener call-in episode. Backgrounds, I pretty much agree with what Hannah said and what Spencer said. I'm not a big fan of deep individual backgrounds before the game ever starts, but I do like the idea of group backgrounds and the bonds and the connections the characters have to each other. And I think there's a lot of value in that, but it takes everybody sitting there together to do that. So I don't like it when one character monopolizes it or one player monopolizes it. I like it when everybody works together on that. The other thing I wanted to mention was Everway. You mentioned that. Pretty sure Dave Aldrich has a complete set of that, and he's a big fan of that system. So if you guys ever want to play, you may want to reach out to your fellow Purple Warmer there. So anyhow, talk to you later.
Hey there, Jason. Thank you very much for the call in. And yeah, I've got to say, I pretty much agree with you about the character backgrounds. I would far prefer to have everyone get together, be bouncing ideas off each other, throwing things into that big old melting pot and coming up with something between yourselves rather than everyone going away separately coming up with their own character backgrounds, then the GM having to like gaffer tape them all together into something that if you squint resembles a coherent whole. It's the same reason I prefer to have a session 0 where people are genning characters together, because you bounce ideas off each other and you may come up with something as a group that you might not have done individually. So that is by far my preference, although I appreciate it's not always possible to get everyone together for that.
That's also a particularly nice feature of Dungeon World,
Yes,
where
it is, yeah.
you're not just coming up with the character backgrounds to fit the campaign world, you're coming up with the campaign world to fit the character backgrounds to some degree as well.
Yeah, you're building from the sort of ground up rather than sort of the top down, aren't you?
Yeah, that can work quite nicely.
I've got to admit, when it comes to Everway, I wasn't particularly a big fan of the system, although I quite like the tarot cards. I thought they were good as I know they're not proper tarot cards, but you know what I mean. I thought they were quite good as a sort of visual aid, and I'd love to incorporate them into other games, but I'm not really a massive fan of the rules themselves. Although, to be fair, I've not really had a chance to play it, so, you know.
I must admit, I think I've got a lot more use out of the Everway cards at LARP as tarot cards.
Yeah.
When I've been pretending to be a fortune teller, because they've got those nice little prompts on that make it super easy.
Yeah.
Compared to actually playing Everway, I think I've probably played it once, maybe twice, way back in high school when we bought it from like the bargain bin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to give it a go at some point if somebody happens to be running a game.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those things where you sort of put it on your list and it'd be nice, but it's not like you sort of, it's not like a deal breaker, if you know what I mean.
I do still like some of those mechanics for the character gen system. Yeah. And it's obviously stuck with me for a while, because like, that was 20 odd years ago.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's the thing about it being very visual, isn't it? It does stick with you a bit more.
Indeed.
Anyway, thank you very much for that, Jason. I think he's got some more to say.
Hey, Hannah and John, Jason here. Just want to say I really enjoyed your Barroom Brawl Hex Flower episode. Great job. Thank you so much. Couldn't be more pleased. As soon as I have a chance, I'll hop on your blog and see what you have up there, and I'll play with it. But, yeah, wonderful job. Great. By the way, I thought you'd appreciate, I'm driving down the road. So I'm sure you've seen in TV shows or whatever, here in America, we have personalized license plates. So you have your license plate on your car, and you can get you can pay money to get all kinds of fancy license plates. You can get custom word, instead of the numbers that they assign you, you could get custom words in there. You can put your last name there. You can put all kinds of funny phrases on there. You can get symbols put on there, so you can get like your college or your sports team or whatever. Well, anyway, I just passed one that had NASA, the NASA symbol on it, you know, the space agency, and then the customized wording on the plate was aliens. So I thought I'd share that with you. Anyhow, I'll talk to you later.
Hey, Jason, glad you enjoyed the Barroom Brawl thing, and thank you for your amusing story about the customised number plates. Yeah, we've got them over here in the UK, although it sounds like yours are maybe a little bit more free-form than ours. There's some like strict limits on what you can have here. I don't know what they are, because, to be honest, the idea of paying over the odds for a number plate has never really appealed to me. But thank you very much. Now let's see what else Jason's got to say.
Hey, Hannah and John, this is Jason. Enjoyed the latest episode, talking about inventories. I always like the idea of the quantum backpack, where everybody has a backpack and has 6 undefined items. Or, you know, I know Spike Picks done it in the past. Colin's done it in the past with a random number of items. This is something you see in Maze Rats and Knave. But basically, you have either 6 items or a random number of items. And, whenever they want to pull something out of the backpack, they have it. And that takes up one of those slots. It just has to be mundane items. But basically, I have 6 undefined items. Hey, I want a 10-foot pole. Okay, write down your sheet. That's one of your 6 items. And that way you're not shopping, but, you're still kind of keeping them from having everything.
Yeah, that is a really good idea and a really good compromise.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Between having the, endless searching for items and strictly defined inventory and just having complete free range. It's a nice compromise, and I can see how that really speeds the game along. Very similar to the system used in Scum and Villainy.
Yeah, and Band of Blades, yeah. Where you get a certain amount of load, as it's called, and you can take effectively a number of items. Now, they're a bit more restricted in Scum and Villainy and Band of Blades because you have a list of stuff you can select from that's themed around your character, but it's very much the same idea. Once you've defined something, that's what it is, and you're stuck with that for the rest of the mission or whatever. But until you define it, certainly in Scum and Villainy, although you have to select stuff pre-mission in Band of Blades, once you've defined something, that's what it is for the rest of the mission. But until then, it's a bit more sort of up in the air and loosely defined. And as Hannah was saying, I think that's a really good compromise between having to do all the shopping, but also not just being able to pull whatever you want out of your backside.
Yeah.
And if you do your Star Trek thing and your Star Trek technology thing, I really look forward to that. I think that'd be a fun episode. And I hope you discuss, and I know I mentioned this to John before, the idea that, when you use the transporter, it actually kills you, and that's your clone, your soulless clone that pops out on the other side. Like to hear talk about that. Talk to you later.
Yeah, so I'm sure we will do a little bit more talking about sort of sci-fi technology and Star Trek tech and stuff like that. However, for a slightly more detailed answer, I'm going to turn over to our resident Trekspert, Hannah, and let her answer what she thinks about the whole sort of transporter thing while I kick back and have a refreshing brew.
I suppose it depends on whether or not a Catra is a soul, because obviously Spock's Catra exists after he's been transported, because otherwise he couldn't have put it into Dr. McCoy and have it then returned to his new body in that weird, confusing way via the Genesis device that I never really quite understood. But anyhow,
it all got a bit biblical, didn't it?
It kind of did. I'm undecided on the transporter thing.
I think personally that it's one of those things in Trek where it's a technology that serves the needs of the plot at whatever particular time. Because we've had the bits with Barclay being stuck in the transporter beam, and
people being aware of being in the transporter
if it just disintegrated you wouldn't be aware of being in it. But then at other times it seemed more like you do get disintegrated. So I think to be honest, with a bit of a sort of nod and a wink, they just use it for whatever plot requirement they have for that particular episode. But I'm sure we will get round to talking about that a bit more in future, Jason. So thank you very much for that call in. Right, let's see who we've got next in the postbag.
Hi, John. It's Rob trying again. Last call didn't work. Regarding inventories, I pretty much agree with you across the board on what you said. Let's keep it simple and straightforward, and let's not waste a lot of time shopping. That said, a couple of simple things. One is for games, especially fantasy games, I tend to simplify it by ruling you're allowed 2 large weapons, 1 ranged weapon, and 1 small weapon, in addition to backpack and all the other stuff. But that's kind of it for the amount of combat-related gear you can carry. The other thing I was going to say was regarding encumbrance and tracking, again, most of the time I agree it's more annoying than it's worth. But it can be fun if you're doing a campaign where it's players versus environment, like a long trek across a desert or through an Arctic environment where food and rations and things like that can really mean the difference between life and death. Anyway, that's it. Enjoying the podcast. Take care, John and Hannah. Bye.
Hey there, Rob. Thank you very much for taking the time to leave that message again. I know the first one you left didn't come through okay, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to leave the message again. Yeah, I pretty much agree with you when it comes to inventories. I'm not a big fan of the whole, like, massive amounts of shopping for equipment, but also I kind of like to let the players have at least some choice and make a little bit of preparation, because that's part of the whole dungeoneering thing. Make sure you got the 10-foot pole, the lamps and stuff like that, your rations if you're going travelling. And I think, to be honest, which, as I think what you've been saying in your message, is that it sort of depends on the focus of the game, really, because, as you were saying, if the game was like focused on, like, oh, you're exploring a desert region, then obviously your inventory becomes vastly more important. You've got to track your rations, your water. You might not be able to replace goods that got damaged or lost. So I think it's just a matter of sort of measuring what your player party are interested in and what's the sort of focus of your game. But I think certainly for a traditional sort of pseudo-medieval D&D style game, the minutiae and inventory of shopping experiences are really not required.
As you're saying about load for weapons and, like, limiting basically how many weapons
like
people can go tooled
you can
up
have
with.
a certain amount of weapons, yeah.
Again, I've been LARPing quite a lot over the last few years. I'm missing it a bit at the moment. It is great fun to see those people who've got really tooled up and they've got 6 axes and 12 swords and 50 daggers strapped to them, and they can barely move for weapons, and to see how quickly they get put down on the battlefield by a lass with a single sword, because she can move faster than they can.
That was why it made me laugh in the recent Band of Blades session when we were talking about, like, what weapons we've had. And in Band of Blades, it might just say you've got a weapon. It doesn't define it. And we were all on horseback going to do this mission. And if you remember, Matthew was like, oh, I might give my character a polearm. And we were all like, you are not carrying a polearm on, like, horseback. And, like, charging into combat. That is not happening. Spear, lance, polearm, giant axe thing on a pole. Anyway, thank you very much for leaving your message, Rob. Let's see who else we've got.
What's up, you two? I finally figured out how to use SpeakPipe, so here we go. Great episode. I loved it. That was so much fun talking about stat distribution. And yeah, Hannah, you were right on the money on that one. While it's not a perfect analogy, stat distribution in terms of wealth redistribution, it's a hell of a lot closer than initiative. So good for you. That was awesome. I have a minute and a half, and I don't have a minute and a half worth of stuff to say. So anyway, super fun episode. I loved it. That's the brilliance of having 2 people on one show. You get that cool back and forth. Awesome points on both sides. Great stuff. Peace out.
That was Joe Richter there from the Hindsightless podcast. Thank you very much for leaving us a message, Joe. We're glad you're enjoying the episodes, and we're enjoying doing them, aren't we, to be honest? It's really nice, as you were saying, Joe, to have both myself and Hannah here, so we can bounce ideas off each other and we can give these opposing viewpoints. Even when we're sort of disagreeing with each other on the air, it means that the people who are listening are getting both viewpoints, and you as the listener can make up your own mind, like, which viewpoint you prefer, rather than just listening to one viewpoint from me or one viewpoint from Hannah.
Indeed. And to be fair, it's probably the closest thing we've had to a major argument over the last 3 months.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think during our marriage, if like the worst we can say is like we got a bit heated when we're discussing D&D stat distribution, then we're doing pretty well, all told.
Yeah, I do think it's one of the benefits for us that we have debates about things like this, and it means we don't end up arguing about other stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, I mean, obviously we're both role players. I mean, we don't game together a massive amount because we have different tastes in RPGs, but we're both gamers, so we both talk about this stuff normally. So having Hannah join me on the podcast has been just really like an extension of the conversations and discussions we have anyway. And sometimes it gets a bit heated because we're both passionate about the hobby. Obviously we are. But in the same way as when people are talking about things online, I always try and get across the idea of you're just having a discussion. If someone else disagrees with you, it's not the end of the world. in the same way me and Hannah can get quite heated in a conversation, but there's no like ill feelings about it afterwards, because at the end of the day, it's a conversation about gaming. It's not a life or death situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, Joe. Glad you're enjoying the episodes. Now, if only I could remember the name of that shape-shifting wizard out of Krull that we were talking about in a recent episode.
Yes, John, you're thinking of Ergo the Magnificent from the movie Krull.
Thanks very much there. That was, of course, Jason Connolly from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, reminding me of the name Ergo the Magnificent from Krull. Much appreciated. Oh, and what's this? I think we've got another message from Rob Davis.
Hello, John and Hannah. I was just listening to your podcast on stat creation. Apologies, John. I'm 100% in camp. Hannah, I hate randomness in character creation in any game, and not just with stats. Some games have you roll for backgrounds or other things. Look, give me a list. Let me choose. I guess it stems from maybe a warped sensibility that everyone starts at the same line. No one gets a head start because of a lucky set of 6 rolls. And I don't. Anyway, I just think it's more fair. And you could say that the randomness, everybody could be equally lucky or unlucky, but I don't. Even if I have the high stats, I don't want someone else with low stats. Everybody starts the same, point by all the way. Randomness can start when the campaign starts. Until then, I would rather you give players full control. Again, it's like you said, John, it's whatever you like, and if everyone's in agreement, it's all good. Enjoying the podcast. Thanks. Bye.
How very dare you, Rob, agreeing with Hannah over me. No, I'm just playing, man. Thank you very much for the message. And yeah, like you say, it's different strokes for different folks at the end of the day. I mean, as we were saying in that episode, love, it's down to what you and your group and your game needs for a particular
You see,
game.
the way I see it, you've already got a random bunch of players who've got random different levels of ability in maths, reading and role-playing in general. And you're going to have to deal with those challenges, so why not just start out with a level playing field as far as the stats go? But that's just me.
Yeah, and I can certainly see the logic of that, and I think...
I like to be in control where I can.
Yeah.
Reduce arguments where possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we said in the original episode, I can certainly see the logic of that depending on what type of game you get. However, for me personally, the game starts when you start generating your character. So I see like the random character genesis like another exciting bit of the game, the anticipation. What stats am I going to get? What sort of character am I going to be able to create from that? But I can also see the reverse
side. The main reason for this, John, is that you don't get attached to your characters and you rarely play them for more than like half a campaign.
I've got to admit, I do wonder whether part of my love of random character gen is because I so rarely get to be an actual player. I'm normally a GM.
True.
And it's like when I do tend to be a player, it's in like one-shots or shorter games or something like Band of Blades where a lot of the characters defined for you. So I very seldom get to play in a game where someone's like, oh, just gen a character. So I think for me, as Hannah said, I have a certain amount of detachment from my characters, which leads to me not being as bothered if they're not exactly what I want. But yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Rob, as is Hannah. It depends what you want, what your group want, what your game needs. And as long as everyone's happy with whatever method you've chosen, that's great. Who am I to naysay that? So thank you very much for your message.
Greetings, John and Hannah. This random table, what about because magic? Surely, you've got to have because magic. Nice one. Catch you later. Take it easy.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And when we put it in a science fiction version of the table, it needs to read because science. Cheers, Colin.
Hey, Hannah and John, really great episode on equipment. I loved it. I especially love when you brought up Isaac Arthur, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. I watch that religiously. There's another fella that does similar videos that are equally as awesome. His name is think it's John Michael Gaudier. I don't know how to actually say it. My phone says it weird. He's got a channel that goes by his name, and then another one called Event Horizon where he interviews super smart folks. It's a great channel, so if you like Isaac Arthur, maybe check that one out too. And then, John asked, how often in movies do you see the heroes going in to a store or whatever and equipping themselves, stocking up and everything? And I would say in 80s action movies, almost in every single one of them. Those are my favorite scenes from 80s action movies, is when the hero goes in and they're strapping up all their guns and checking their ammo belts and all that shit. I love it. Anyway, you two are awesome. Peace out.
There's also quite a few cool shopping scenes in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Cheers for that, Joe.
Yeah, see, my thing about these sort of shopping scenes that you tend to see where the hero's tooling up is they're quite often done as a montage. And I agree, yeah, that can be really interesting and really exciting. Get some like 80s power chords going in the background. Lovely. However, that does not tend to drag on like a shopping scene in a game can. I mean, it's the difference between like seeing like Conan like polishing his sword and maybe like grabbing some armour off his shelf than having a player be like, oh, so do I get like a discount if I buy like 50 candles from this shop? Oh, how many gold pieces does that breastplate cost? Oh, can I get some extra ornamentation put on it for like an additional cost? The shopping scene in a role-playing game does not tend to be as exciting as the tooling up montage in an action film. Not saying that's always the case. I mean, maybe better GMs than me can make such scenes really exciting, but I've never seen it.
I will say for the shopping scene is it's an excellent thing to put in if suddenly a player character needs to leave the room for a short while you're in the market. You do a shopping scene, you keep everybody else in character while he goes and does his phone call or nips down to the shop or whatever. He can come back in.
That's true.
And you're back to the session and you've not lost the rhythm for the rest of the player characters. It's got its uses.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Thank you very much for that call, Joe. Now, I think we've got a last couple from Jason here.
Hey, Han and John. This message is mainly for John because he very rudely recorded an episode without Hannah present. So I just wanted to say, as far as building campaign worlds and developing those and all that kind of thing, I do it emergent. I have a general idea in my head, but I tend to develop it as I go. I don't map it all out ahead of time. I don't tend to use them in multiple games or, multiple campaigns. So they're pretty much one and done. And then I move on to the next thing. I tend to run things in a variety of different worlds instead of staying in the same world. For inspiration, I'll use, movies, TV, books. I don't necessarily just sit and roll on random charts or things like that. I probably need to start doing that and get more diligent at building things ahead of time and, better system as far as developing towns and NPCs and all that. I'm getting ready to start a Boot Hill play-by-post game, and I'm going to have to be more diligent with building the world and having it ready for that, I guess. But I don't know. I'm probably a bad example, so you can disregard what I've said. Talk to you later.
Thanks very much for the call, Jason. Really appreciate that. And I think, I'm pretty much leaning towards the same idea for whatever my next game is. Like I say, probably old school essentials. I'm very much leaning towards the idea of sort of loosely defining the type of campaign world. Then maybe if I go a bit hex crawl, sort of just doing like the first few hexes around the home base and sort of building up the rest of the world from there emergently, as you were saying, rather than trying to define it all in advance, which is an awful lot of work, and I think a lot of it probably doesn't get used anyway. Sorry, what was that, Jason? You've got something else?
Hey, John. Inspiration just struck me. Oh, hi, Hannah. How you doing? So, here's what you do. You have each player write a 5 to 10 page backstory and build your world off that. There you go. Money in the bank.